Yes, good morning, Count Corley, and I want to ask the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform if he will report on the implementation of the Haddington Road Agreement and give us the real effects of that agreement.
Thank you, Deputy.
Minister. Margaret, I thank the Deputy for the question. As the House will be aware, the measures negotiated under the Haddington Road Agreement will deliver a further €1 billion in the Public Service Pay and Pensions Bill, a reduction of €1 billion by 2016. The focus of public service management is now firmly on the delivery of the required level of savings, and there has been significant progress in the implementation of the agreement at various levels. The Cabinet Committee on Public Service Reform, which is chaired by the Taoiseach, meets regularly to review, among other public service reform issues, progress on the implementation of Haddington Road. In addition, officials of my department represent public service management on the agreement's oversight group, which is charged with addressing the issues of implementation and interpretation under the agreement as they arise. In terms of cost reductions, almost $300 million in savings arising from the implementation of various measures under the agreement was incorporated into the various votes in the context of the revised estimates for last year. The measures and reforms implemented helped to ensure that spending remained in line with profile and resulted in Ireland delivering on our fiscal target for last year and, of course, enabling us to exit the Troika programme. Furthermore, the full-year impact of the measures implemented in 2013 have been incorporated into the respective votes for this year, 2014. In addition, a number of other measures which will deliver additional savings this year and beyond, such as the deferral of incremental progression, have also been incorporated into all votes as appropriate.
Deputy Higgins.
Minister, can I put it to you that the effects of the Haddington Road Agreement are now becoming obvious in the form of a deterioration of public services from the point of view of ordinary people, and are in fact destructive of public services? Can I put it to you that the recent prime-time expose of a crisis in the ambulance service nationally show that you cannot take thousands of workers from public services, including the health service, and still expect to have a comprehensive service for our people? Can I ask you, in relation to the collective agreements in the local authority sector in Haddington Road, do you agree that trade unionists now rue that that agreement ever went through, when you now are taking hundreds of long-term unemployed, you're going to compel them into forced labour with local authorities through the Gateway scheme, working 19.5 hours for €20 a week, €1.03, doing quite crucial work. Village enhancement schemes, landscaping, control of animals, libraries, that should be the subject of full-time, properly paid jobs with decent conditions.
Thank you.
Rather than forcing people who are unfortunate to be long-term unemployed because no jobs are being created, real jobs, into this type of forced labour.
Minister.
Again, the Deputy poses a number of questions. He asked about the effects of Haddington Road in the agreement. Let me be absolutely honest and frank about it. Without Haddington Road, I don't believe we could have had a budget that would be acceptable and passed this House last year. I don't think we would have exited the bailout. I think there would be a crisis in this country. That's my view of it. And that's why before the end of 2012, I opened the books to the trade unions. As a good employer, I said, there's the circumstances and there are the options. And I asked all trade unions in the public sector to engage with me, and they did. It was a very difficult, stressful process for all concerned, because we were asking people who had already given a contribution in our national recovery, who didn't feel any responsibility for the calamity within which the Exchequer found itself, and rightly so, to make a further contribution. But without exception, every trade union did. And I don't believe for a second that they rue anything, because everybody, every citizen, including every public servant, especially every public servant, has a real stake in the recovery of our country. And you talk about unemployment. When this government came to office 3 years ago, there was a real fear, and in some cases an expectation, that unemployment would exceed 500,000 and social disintegration would follow. Unemployment is now falling and has done for the last 18 months. There are 390,000 people unemployed, and the IBEC expectation is that it will be under 11% this year. I hope that is realised, and it was the actions of government, all of them difficult and all of them resisted by you, that has led us to that better path of recovery, which will rebound to the benefit of not only every public servant, but every citizen in the country.
Deputy, 1 minute.
Minister, you raise very fundamental issues there when you say that if we hadn't Haddington Road, we would not have had a budget. But you're basing that on the whole acceptance of the Troika-forced programme of compelling the Irish people to take on board tens of billions of euro of debt that wasn't theirs. And when you came into government, you could have broken that cycle, but you decided to continue to sacrifice our nurses and local authority workers and others on the altar of the financial markets. That's the reality of the situation. Don't you agree? And in relation to employment, Minister, don't you agree that this whole programme of austerity has seriously undermined employment creation in this state, and that it is by reinvestment, particularly major public investment, instead of paying off bondholders, that would be that the crisis of unemployment would be resolved? And again, can I put it to you that it's shameful that you would be part of a scheme forcing people, unfortunate enough to be long-term unemployed, off the dole onto forced labour schemes.
The basic thesis, we got to the heart of it now from the Deputy, is that we should have reneged on the solemn commitments made that I voted against by the previous Dáil in relation to our requirements. What would be the consequences of that? If we said we're not paying the debts that were there, we would be in default. We'd have no funding for public services because the only funders that we had up to the end of last year were the Troika. So our public services would have collapsed. Now that might have, you know, for somebody who thinks anarchy is the way to a new society, that might have suited that thesis. But those of us who actually want to have decent public services, decent standard of living for people, and not a collapse of anarchy, can't live in the fantasy world, of being able to say that we can actually walk away, default as a nation, and there will be no consequence to us. That is absolute fantasy land, and most ordinary people understand that full well.